There we are. We are live. Welcome, everybody. If you're tuning in on LinkedIn or via the pre-registered event, thank you for joining us. Got a really interesting sort of roundtable open discussion. We've still got a guest yet to join us. He'll be here in the next, I'm going to guess, 60 to 100 seconds as he's come apparently running from lunch. So that'd be interesting to see the state of him when he joins us. But we'll do Mikey's intro in a moment. I'm joined today by our regular guest, Neil Clarke, who's our commercial director here at Air Marketing, and also by Kaitlen Kelly, who is the senior manager of sales development at Outreach. Unless your title has changed since I last checked LinkedIn, I'll confirm that's correct, Kaitlen.
It is correct. It has not changed.
Good start.
Just yet, I should say.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here today. We've invited you on to join this open discussion. Hopefully the people watching and listening will get some interesting insight, and our topic's quite a deep one today. Each month we talk about an element of what you need to do if you're setting up your own outbound team. So outbound sales team, building it internally, what are the things you need to think about? Over the previous months, we've talked about what you need to do before you start, the planning phase. We've talked about the onboarding of SDRs. We talked about data and data strategy. This month, we're going to be talking about picking your channels. So what channels should you be adopting or prioritizing and why? And also looking at sequences or otherwise known as cadences. What does best practice look like? What should we be thinking about when we think about the pattern of outreach and the way that we use that in the channels that we decide. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that everybody's got a different opinion. It is not one of those things that adds up and is right in one environment and then the next. So we can hopefully pluck some information out of everybody's brain today and help our audience to gain some insight on what might work if they were building internally or looking to refresh what they're doing internally. Kaitlen, what I might do before we kick off though, and until Michael will join us shortly, is just get you to give a quick 30 seconds on your experience in and around this and a bit on your role at Outreach as well.
Yeah, of course. So like Owen had mentioned, Kaitlen Kelly, I lead the SDR team for Outreach in EMEA and been with Outreach for just over 2 years now. And kind of my experience in this whole SDR land and outbound prospecting is I actually started out as an SDR with Outreach and was based out of Seattle, Washington, so on the US team. And then when we decided to launch globally, I made the leap across the pond and kind of came over here as a player coach. And the first 4 months or so was in the weeds with my team of 3 that we had at the time, and kind of carved out the sequences, frameworks, and the team, and then scaled the team to starting next week, we'll be at 28 people within the SDR org, which is super exciting to kind of see the growth and I think everything that we've been able to achieve in the last 20 months or so. But that's kind of, SDR to leading the team with everyone right next to me. So
great stuff. Yeah. Great stuff. And you'll be pleased to know that we've got an esteemed guest who's decided to join us. I'll add him up on the stage. There he is, Mikey, having done a run with his tummy full, no doubt. So Mikey, without further ado, I'm going to throw you straight in and get you to do a quick 30-second intro on yourself.
Yeah, perfect. I run a sales consultancy called Genie, predominantly working on the top of the funnel. So we do a lot of outbound sales and help companies build playbooks, cadences, and also do a lot of training and coaching with them. And sequences is one of my favorite topics. So looking forward to today's discussion.
Lovely stuff. Neil, I won't come to you. I think I've got you doing an intro each month, and I think you've nailed the pattern down. So we'll just say that you have an angle of in-house at Air, but also our client base at Air, which is a really nice mix. Obviously, in Kaitlen, we've got somebody who looks after this internally in an in-house model, and in Mikey, we've got somebody who looks at it as a consultancy from outside. So I think we've got a really nice mixture of viewpoints here, which is great. So without further ado, we'll get stuck into it. Guys, if you're watching this, feel free to post questions in the chat. I'm happy to put those questions across to people. This is an open discussion, roundtable, and I'd love to know what you'd like to know more about when it comes to building out sequences, picking channels, pros and cons of each channel, all that sort of stuff. I'm going to start on the channels, if that's okay, because I know we've got some different viewpoints here. I guess we'd all agree that there's three primary channels, which are the phone, email, and I think LinkedIn for sales development or social, if you like. But underneath that, you've got what I refer to as almost like sub-channels. So video, voice, to a degree, SMS and WhatsApp, all things that are more and more coming into the outbound prospecting process, that maybe video is in LinkedIn or it's in email or whatever it might be, but it does differentiate at times. Mikey, I'll come to you. Have you got a favorite? Have you got one that you hang on a lot that you think that you think is a non-negotiable?
No, I feel like it's almost like don't get offended by this, Owen, almost like the wrong question, because I feel like all the channels complement each other. So I don't feel like, oh, I'm just going to do 100 calls, I'm going to do 100 emails, or I'm going to do 100 LinkedIn messages, because to me, so we see that email has the lowest conversion rates in terms of like per email booked to meeting. But email is still not a channel I'd say don't use it at all, because it can help you warm up for a call, right? Because if you call someone and they've seen your email or you shared a bit of content on email, that's really helpful. You mentioned things like videos and voice notes as well. So we see really good traction again on those. But again, that, like you said, kind of a video in itself is not a channel. It's more something you put into another channel. And I think something to focus on is just being different, because if you put yourself in the shoes of the people that you're selling to, so say like, you know, a VP, C-level person, they're now getting, because of automation, probably like 200 or 300 sales pitches a week. And most of those are just text. Most of those are kind of rubbish messaging. So if you can do something different, like send a video or a voice note, it instantly stands out. And then just a quick tip I have for everyone who's thinking about, okay, what do I do in a video? One of the things you can actually do is share screen on the LinkedIn profile. So I was like targeting, and I could share screen on his LinkedIn and say, hey, I noticed you were doing this roundtable with Kaitlen and Michael. Or you could go on their company website and share screen and say, hey, I noticed you have these people as customers. Like, how are you trying to get more similar customers? So I think people often just do these selfie videos and people are getting sick of them. So try and share screen if you're going to do a video on something related to the person that you're reaching out to.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. And thank you for your feedback on my questioning. I will work harder. Kaitlen, Kaitlen, we're all honest and open in this discussion. Surely you've got a favourite channel.
Yeah, so I think Mikey kind of nailed it on the head there with saying, you know, all the channels are going to play in tandem with each other. So you can't just choose one and then leave out the other ones, because you're going to drive successes in different ways. But I think the key is to be hyper personalized and then relevant in your outbound prospecting. If I was to lean on one, which is going to contradict what a lot of you will say, but if I had to choose one, and if I was looking at data alone and for that first touch point into kicking off conversation, I'd probably go heavy into LinkedIn, just because you can do the voice note, you can do the video, and there's different areas that you can engage on that as well. So that would be one of the areas that I would lean into to kick off that process.
One of the things that I see and feel is that a lot of sales leaders, people who post content about sales, thought leaders, whatever you want to call people who've got an opinion, seem to have a strong opinion based on what works for them in their environment. Now, I think we're all reasonably fortunate in that we sell a lot to salespeople, so they hang out on LinkedIn. It's fair to say, though, if you're selling into people who work in care homes, if you're a software that's selling to care homes, for example, then it's unlikely they're going to be hanging on LinkedIn. And I think this is something that gets missed in the conversation around channels, that it isn't this is the best channel scenario. It is based on where people hang out. And I think my advice to people, Neil, you maybe add something to this in terms of some of the examples we see, it is very much around, you can't take what works elsewhere. You have to look at where people are hanging out, where they like to receive information, where they like to be talked to, and go and spend time there.
For me, I agree. I think I see each of the sort of delivery channels to try and get some engagement. I see it as a spectrum of sales and marketing. You know, some things you want to go right over to the marketing piece and just have that to build awareness. You know, something more like phone-based, actually having conversations, trying to qualify, trying to build a bit of curiosity, is much more along the sales spectrum. I think we now have an ability to monitor, track, and see what that engagement is like. And I think out of all of it, where things look like they're getting hard is where you're just trying to commoditize those steps and just get them siloed and commoditize them. So it's about, I've got my favorites, and I think, having a conversation is always a way to gauge context and temperature check people and get them to open up and realize that you're human and have that. And I think you're right. One of the things I wrote down is, where are your ideal clients? If they don't hang out on LinkedIn, then you're just shouting into a big channel that no one's really listening other than your own network.
We've got a question here. Ryan Restart, some of you know Ryan very well. The phone ready leads trademark will give away perhaps some of the tone of the questioning, but huge fan of Ryan's. So he said, does cold email actually produce any results? If so, what percentage of pipeline can be attributed to cold email? I guess that depends on the volume of cold email you're doing and the focus you're putting on it. Anyone want to put their hand up and maybe give either some data or anecdotal feedback on where they have seen that work or not work around cold email?
I can kick us off with this one.
Go for it.
Cool. So 100% cold email is going to produce some results. Like typically when we're kind of talking about like a sequence structure, on day one, we'll have 3 different touch points on that same day. So that will be that cold email, it'll be a LinkedIn touch, and then it'll also be a phone call. So it's building momentum throughout on day one. But that cold email, when I do dig into our results, typically we'll generate about 3 or 4% of our opportunities just off of that. And then when I look into like replies and what's actually going to kick off that conversation, which then could go into a phone call from there, where you'll see about a 14 to 16% reply rate. So cold email does work, and I would highly suggest starting off the touch points with that as well. I think the key here, though, is the relevancy and the personalization. If it's not personalized, it's going to get skipped. It's not going to get read, and that's kind of kicking it off with that first line in the email.
Okay, I'm going to come back to the personalization bit in a moment, if that's okay. Mike, I want to bring you in on this from a cold email perspective. What do you see in terms of results?
Yeah, I totally agree with Kaitlen. It sounds like they have a similar sequence to what we have at Growth Genie, which is that we call it a triple threat, which you mentioned, which is the email, the LinkedIn touch, and the call all in one day, and they can all kind of complement each other. I think where cold email goes wrong is where you essentially do like a blast, which is like, okay, we're going to do a general sequence. If a client ever says to us, we're going to do a general sequence, I say, no, we're not. Because general sequences go nowhere, because you need to split up your list into, okay, what's our target audience? What industry are they? What persona are they? And you can the personalization, it sounds like you're going to come on to later, but you can use a tool like Outreach to actually automate but personalize at the same time. But it all comes down to your list, because if you know, like we have a trigger event, if a company's hiring SDRs or SDR managers, they're probably a good fit for our service. So I could identify 200 people that are hiring SDRs, and I could say, hey, notice you're hiring SDRs, and then go into some pain points about that. And it seems personalized, even though it's actually automated. So that's the thing. It's at the start where cold email goes wrong, people just do like a spray and pray approach, and that's not going to work for anyone.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Ryan, for the question. I think, just to add something on that, one of the things I always talk about is the fact that any channel will produce a level of results. It's about measuring to what degree should you be spending more or less time on that channel, or putting more or less focus on it. So I think it's fair to say again that in some environments, it may well be that cold email produces some pipeline for you, but that the time it takes to deliver on that might be better put into LinkedIn or the phone, and equally the same is true the other way around. So I think my advice to people will be about measuring the data, making sure that whatever channels you're going to choose to go with, probably if you're doing it for the first time, you won't have the data that tells you what right looks like. Look at all of the channels, assuming your audience hang out there to some degree, use them, but track and measure, and let the data and the results guide you on where to put more or less focus. I want to touch on this multi-channel concept though, because I think what Ryan will be getting at to some degree, whether he is in his question or not, I don't know, but certainly I've talked to Ryan before about this, is, do we overcomplicate by going across multi-channels? Is it now a cool fad to say, well, I've got to be good across that? Do we make it harder for SDRs to be good at their job by giving them 3-4 things to master, over giving them a focal point whether that be email, whether that be the phone, say go and master that, go and be exceptional at that. What are the reasons we go and look to go across multiple channels? Neil, I'll come to you first on that. In your experience, why is multi-channel a sensible outreach strategy, or when is it a sensible one?
I think if I'm honest, it always has been, just it hasn't been as well measured and tracked and incorporated into CRMs. So I think there's always been on business development and in roles, it's always been a really essential part of messaging and being able to try and get in touch with someone, whether you're self-sourcing, whether you're looking for enterprise. And I think that it's always been. What I think has happened over the last few years is that the proliferation of tech and SaaS in being just, something that has been embedded at entry level companies, being able to bring in CRMs mean that we can just get a lot more polished. I think we've almost gone too far and need to bring it back slightly, in that, what we can't just do is adopt a recommended sequence and put just utter belief that it's going to work. I think there always has been the need. It's just having a sense of realism, expectation management, and just to touch on your last question, look at where you're delivering your email. How many emails does that person get a day? You will net some results because you'll be right place, right time, versus a call, versus LinkedIn. When are they going to digest their LinkedIn? Is it going to be in the evening when they've got a bit more time? And how do you need to message that? I think it's always been important. It's just there's never been so obvious and so much measurement in how much time we spent doing steps.
Kaitlen, I'll bring you in on this. Why multi-channel? Why is that a good strategy, or is it not always a good strategy?
Yeah, I would say multi-channel is a good strategy. Kind of what I touched base on earlier is like building that momentum between the different channels and kind of almost webbing them all together. You never know where that prospect actually is going to be in that moment. So if you're giving them a call and they're in a meeting, they're not going to answer their phone. But if you were to send an email that would loop back to the voicemail that maybe you just left, or engaged with one of their LinkedIn posts or something like that, you can interweb them all together, and it's building that relationship before you could even have that first touch point, that first conversation. So you can't just rely on one channel because not all prospects are going to be living in that channel. You got to web them all together, and that will help build momentum to convert at the end of the day.
Mikey, anything to add on that?
Yeah, 100% agree. It's got to be multi-channel. To answer one of your questions, Owen, about like, are we overcomplicating things? Do we need to train every single SDR or sales rep like every single channel? I think every single sales rep does need to learn at least the basics of phone, email, and LinkedIn. And the reason is that if you call someone and they agree to a meeting, they're like, send me X, Y, and Z information beforehand. They've still got to learn to write that email. And then what I do before I cold call anyone, I get their LinkedIn profile up and I'm visualizing the person I'm speaking to. I'm trying to get a couple of nuggets that I can say. So I think, yes, of course, some people are going to be better speakers. Some people are going to be better writers, but it's really important that they've got at least the basics down, because I feel like all three of those channels are kind of absolutely essential nowadays.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you for that. And I think it's important that we don't miss that point, that is there a need for reps to be masters of them all? I think, again, a lot of this is determined by your market and the personas within your market and where they hang out. But understanding the basics can get you further along sometimes. I completely agree for that. Obviously, you've been spending too much time with Kaitlen as you turned a Z into a Z there, which is quite interesting. Mike, I know you've worked for a US company for a long time, but interesting to hear that come out.
What word was that? I didn't hear that.
You said X, Y, and Z, right?
Oh, right. Okay.
X, Y, and Z.
There we
I
go.
think it's Sesame Street coming across there. So Alex Shrimpton has added some comments. I think the give emails are massively important in the first phases. Yeah, also added a comment saying instead of trying to have a call to action in the first email. Mikey, I know you and I have talked about that in the past, where we're not just sending an email and saying, give me a meeting. We're actually trying to give them something that might be of value. Maybe you could just individually touch on an example of how you've done that well.
Yeah, definitely. It's something I would actually say to Alex is you can still have a call to action and do the meeting. And this was actually a big game changer for us a couple of years ago. So what we used to do, we used to just say, hey, here's a really relevant piece of content that I think could help you. So it used to be, notice you're hiring SDRs. Here's a 30 touch sequence that we use that may be helpful for your team. The problem with that is they click on it and they see it and they've got some awareness of what you do, but they don't reply and start a conversation. So now as an alternative, what we do, hey, notice you're hiring SDRs. Would you be interested in seeing a 30 touch sequence template that could help them book more meetings, right? And then they say yes, and you've started a conversation. And this is like a little cheeky trick that sometimes happens. This goes into the multi-channel thing. When someone replies to your email, often their phone number is in their signature. So we recommend calling them as soon as possible, because if they've replied to your email, you're top of mind at that point, and you can start a conversation about whatever they've replied to.
Nice. Kaitlen, if I wanted to sell to you, how would I best get a conversation with you? What channel would work with you?
I think the best channel, I mean, it's going to be email or a LinkedIn message. It's not, I don't pick up the phone, which is bad because I expect everyone to be using the phone. But yeah, I would say email, and it has to be hyper personalized and tied back to something that's going to be relevant to me.
Neil, how about you? Sorry, Kaitlen, you.
No worries.
Did you want to add something?
No, I'm good. You can pass it to Neil.
Sorry, Neil, how about you? How would I best, what channel would you be most likely to respond to?
Give me a call. I think if best intention, I might see something either on my phone or in a meeting, drop into the inbox. It will drop below the tide line, and then depending on priorities, will depend on whether it gets back or it gets deleted in a week because it's lost. It's lost. So I phone for me.
Mikey?
Yeah, same as Neil. Probably a combination of Kaitlen and Neil. Phone or LinkedIn. Email is very difficult. We're actually looking at starting a podcast soon, so I've been interested in podcast vendors. A couple have reached out to me by chance, and most of them all of them have just emailed me. Whereas if they put in like a LinkedIn touch or a phone touch, I probably would have booked the meeting, but I haven't had time to book the meeting with any of them.
The reason I asked that question is to demonstrate how different we all are. And there's a great example. Okay, you're similar to Neil. Kaitlen is different. Mine actually is video. I'm a sucker for it. I don't know why. Watch me go and get 20 videos in my email tomorrow. But for some reason, I got a very busy inbox. You'd think that given we preach about the phone as a primary tool, it would be by phone. But I actually don't have a business phone number. So if you phone our landline, the guys can't actually transfer a call to me. Now they can transfer it to my mobile, but we don't. So if you've got my mobile number, good on you. Use it, phone me, and I'll answer it, and I'll happily talk to people. But outside of having that phone number, you're very unlikely to get me via a cold call. But yet we conduct cold calls as an organisation. I think that, if nothing else, emphasises just how important multi-channel can be, because I might be talking about phone as an outbound, but that might not be the way that I behave. It might just be the way that the prospects that we target behave. And I think a lot of people think about themselves. How would I respond, and don't think about their audience? If you're selling into sales commercial leaders, here's a great example, right? We've got 3-4 people on here that you could put into that broad category who all, to a degree, like to be engaged in 4 different ways. And that shows that actually it might be one way for one person, one way for the next. The profile might be exactly the same, but they receive information in different ways. So it's increasing your chances of getting engagement. But I will take us back to that data, track the efficiency of it, track how much time you put into it versus opportunities that come from it. Because it might be great to go, well, I want to engage everybody, but actually, if you've got to try 50 times with somebody, maybe having a dive out policy and a qualify out policy a lot earlier would make sense. Really interesting. I'm keen to get your input on video, voice, and one of the more controversial ones around things like SMS and WhatsApp, which over the last year or so have really crept in. And Kaitlen, I'll come to you first. Have you guys, or to what degree have you guys adopted video and voice memos on LinkedIn and things like that?
Yeah, so it's built into a majority of our sequences. We use it pretty heavily. I think with video, not everyone's going to excel at video, and I think it is kind of finding that niche. Sometimes it could just be yourself kind of holding a little bit of a prop and going for the pitch, or it could be doing the screen recording like Mikey had mentioned there. But the team definitely leverages the voice notes, the video, and then we also have the text that is going off.
Have you seen differences between the two? So are there any of those that are really standing out, or things that you're leaning on more now?
Yeah, so we lean on the voice notes more just for efficiency reasons. Videos take a little bit longer to plan out. But if you can really like own the video and drill down on it, we have had SDRs that have generated up to 60% of their quotas just off the video pitches. So that is a great way to go about it. When we think about the text, that's after the opportunity is generated. That's after the relationship's been built. It's not a cold text going out to people. So that is something I should probably say there. I don't know if anyone else has experience going completely cold with the text, but we haven't quite got there yet.
I have genuinely had one cold FaceTime call, cold video FaceTime call, which was one of the most, one of the bravest things I've ever seen anyone do. And my personality was very much a case of, geez, they've earned the right to talk to me, I'll tell you that much. They caught me at a good time. If they caught me at a bad time, then maybe we would have got a different response. But yeah, I don't think we're there yet, that's for sure. Mikey, what's your take on those things?
Yeah, I think when it comes to SMS and WhatsApp, I agree with Kaitlen, probably for warmer leads. I think it's good actually, I found, for like no-shows or meetings, to send like a reminder on SMS to remind someone about a meeting. Also, if you're like 5 minutes into the call and they haven't turned up, rather than sending them an email, send them an SMS. I think the average open rate for an SMS is like 95% versus like 20% for an email. And then when it comes to videos and voice notes, I'm a huge voice note fan. Owen knows. Owen and I talk a lot, and I just bombard him with voice notes all the time. The reason I think most people know about videos, but very few people actually know about LinkedIn audio notes. So often the reaction I get when I send someone a voice note on LinkedIn is, wow, this is really cool. I had no idea you could send a voice note on LinkedIn. And then from an SDR perspective or a sales rep perspective, I find they're really productive. I can actually send way more voice notes than actually like typing out a message. And then video is also great. Like you said, Owen, you're a sucker for them. Kaitlen said the team's getting a lot of meetings, but they can be a bit time consuming, like what I was talking about, going to their LinkedIn profile, their company website, getting a nugget. So I love voice notes because you can kind of be very productive and you can be quite human and authentic at the same time.
Love that. And Neil, coming to you, I think one of the things I like about voice notes is that you stand out. We're still in the minority using it as an outreach strategy, whereas I think videos have reached that point where they have become the thing to do to a degree, and new things are really helping to stand out and helping to differentiate. But after a while, they become more and more normal, and then they get diluted into it. I feel like videos may be further along than voice memos on that.
Yeah, I agree. Be memorable, stand out. Sometimes someone will respond based on the fact that they go, wow, that was different. Let's happy to spend 15 minutes, finding out a bit more. Not many can pass the, sending a note, immediately trying to book a discovery call, and we're pretty sure we've got something that is really just purely because I just scan it and it's not different. So the voice notes, definitely. I think as well, sometimes like utilizing video, but even if you can get a CEO or get something in there, just something that is different than a text-based note is gonna be, you're gonna be memorable. It's gonna be something, and you might be educating them, as Mikey said. If you're doing something different, then that's something that they're going to think, well, they're innovative, they're fresh, they're the type of people that we might want to deal with. I think that's key.
Yeah, two comments to share from the audience. One is from Alex again. Shrimpo's on it today. He's contributing loads. It's great. Just giving them an option to come back to me, and also setting a precedent that having communication on those channels are acceptable going forward. I think it's a really good point there that we set the tone of the conversation and the relationship with prospects. And by using channels that maybe allow us to be a bit more familiar, we set the precedent, and we encourage them to communicate with us in that way, which fires the engagement back and forwards a lot faster. So I like that. Connor Greer, kudos to you. So joining us says, sorry, I work in IT. What's an SRD? He then puts SDR in the next comment. It's a sales development rep, my friend. So somebody who is prospecting on behalf of our organization to try and generate qualified opportunities. what I love about that is you've got somebody coming from outside of the industry wanting to learn and investing his own time in trying to develop and learn about something. So Connor, thank you for joining us and asking the question. Absolutely right. We all talk in these codes in and amongst our sectors, don't we? That people outside of it don't necessarily understand. So we should try and remember to talk in layman's terms a little more at times. Thank you so much for the question. So look, really good summary of channels so far. And we very much touched on the fact that there are, there's a good reason to be adopting more than one channel. Certainly, be looking at your audience and understanding where they sit, where they hang out, how they like to be engaged. Understand that not all of your prospects can be put into one profile and one basket, and that the data behind it is really key. So trying things and using the data, and then what I keep hearing is stand out, cut through the noise, differentiate yourself. And then that word personalization. So let's just touch in on that. Kaitlen, I said I'd come back to you, so I'm coming to you first. What on earth is personalization? What is this thing that people keep talking about?
Personalization, it's a broad question. I feel like when I think of personalization, it's creating relevancy to that person. So you're doing your research, you understand their industry, their role, maybe some of their initiatives. Could really be anything that you can tie back to the value of what you're trying to pitch or what you're trying to sell. So, but the key is to make it specific to that person so that it couldn't be going out to anyone else. That's kind of what personalization would mean to me.
Okay. Mikey?
Yeah, I think the key word Kaitlen mentioned there is relevance, because one of the big mistakes I see with personalization is people do personalization and then they go straight into a sales pitch and then you've got no relevance. So personalization without relevance is kind of useless. It'd be like if I contacted you and said, hey, I was listening to a Roundtable again, blah, 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 and then you're like, I want to sell you my cybersecurity software. Can we have a meeting? You're like, well, what's the link between my Roundtable and cybersecurity software? But I see reps do this all the time because they're going on LinkedIn and they're seeing these posts about, oh yeah, do personalization, and they just chuck in personalization and then go into their sales pitch, and people can see through that. They're like, the only reason you're doing that is to kind of butter me up to sell me something. So always then link that personalization into whatever you're selling. That's the key.
Yeah, brilliant. I like that. And look, we use that word relevancy because I think personalization has very much, and Neil, I'll bring you in on this, and we've seen some bad examples of it, but it's very much been put up as a priority, and we've seen people mistake it for, oh, you like Star Wars. I can see you like Star Wars, so let's make it all about Star Wars. And sometimes humor works, and it helps you to cut through, but it can be highly irrelevant and in some ways a bit of a cheesy positioning strategy that gets you put down the status order. Neil, from a personalized perspective, any input on that? Any opinion around what you should and shouldn't be looking to do in there?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because you kind of want to respect people's boundaries. You've never spoken to that person before, and you're trying to go in and open. I always think, like, if it was at a networking event, would I go up to Mikey, having seen some of that stuff, and dive in? And it's a bit like that Facebook stalker, isn't it? Of going, hey, I've looked at all your photos and I've looked at all your posts. You just got to make sure you think about that as not going in too much. And then I think, as Mikey said, there's then a big step off where it's the body message, which is, oh, and I do see you like Manchester United, and but can we now talk about my very very niche service? It's it's tricky. It's a bit like a dating game, isn't it? Or networking. What would be right to open up with someone if you saw, their badge, their stand, anything like that? How would you interact? Because that's the bit that stands out for me, is when someone goes a bit too personal or pick up on one thing, which is a bit like, AI on shopping. I've once searched for an item, and for the next 6 months, I just keep getting that items ads popped up in my feed, but it doesn't mean I was massively over it and into it.
Got you. Thanks for that. Guys, we've had 3 really good points or questions from the audience that I want to bring in. So James, Alex, and Kanish, I think I've said that. Kashish, sorry, I think I've said that right. Should have put my glasses on before I start reading words as well. But I will bring your questions in now, so stick with me. I'm going to start with, sorry, I've got to make sure I've got my glasses on to read this. This is sad and showing my age. So Kashish says, with so many people using email automation tools, how do we use automation and still make sure to add relevance and personalization? I think a very good question. We probably won't go around everybody, but does anybody want to take that and feel that's in a good place to add some value?
Yeah, I can take that one. I'm sure Kaitlen has a lot to say on this, working at Outreach as well. But I think we always combine the two, because that's always I think people are either trying to like completely automate or completely personalize. And I think the best way is to do both. So say you send someone like a very personalized video, whether that's on email or it's on LinkedIn, you could have just a follow-up, like, any thoughts on the video, Owen? Because what happens is people are so busy, often they won't see your video. So you put all that effort into making that video, and then they don't see it. So by sending that follow-up, it's like, oh, I don't know what video he's talking about. Scroll above to the last message and click on the video. So that's kind of an example of, you can create like a very personalized message and then an almost quite like automated follow-up. And often you're surprised because you actually book a meeting on the follow-up rather than the original personalized message.
Kaitlen, did you want to add something?
Mikey is speaking my language right there. That's exactly what I was going to say. Keep the first email, that first touch point, 100% hyper personalized, and then you can do the automation further down into the sequence. Get more bang for your buck too on the research you're going to do up front.
We're going to have to get some questions that you guys disagree on soon, so that we can start to get differences of opinion like that. Okay, so James, actually, he's come across in two. He said he hit enter too early, so I'll put the first part up and then the second part. So thank you for the feedback, James, first and foremost. In terms of cadencing and personalization, when it comes to LinkedIn, what's the best approach? What's the approach? A lot of sales leaders I'm seeing on LinkedIn don't seem to enjoy, you can guess the second bit, being approached on LinkedIn at all. What's the best way to do a light touch on LinkedIn without going too pitch heavy? Neil, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for me, LinkedIn is a blend of personal networking, whether you could potentially be looking at recruiting people. A lot of people are using it for online CVs, as a career builder. I just think you need to use it as a warm people up, and then once you've got that, that's why you've got multi-channel. You could be pitching, you could be dropping notes on there, share some really relevant content, or share something that's going to make them take a step towards you. And also, it's about kind of a peer-to-peer approach as well. Sometimes you need to know how that stands along there. So the guys above us, I'm sure, have got loads to say on how LinkedIn fits within that. I think I'd push it more into the, building up a bit of trust, awareness, sharing good stuff, liking, the odd comment. But for me, it's not the place to be sending in pitching and building things. It's not designed for long, heavy either calls or emails. But Kaitlen and Mikey, I'm sure, will add a lot to this as well.
Kaitlen, do you want to go? Anything to add? Feel free to pass on if you either agree or don't have anything to add on it.
Yeah, I think for that first touch point on LinkedIn, you definitely don't want to go on heavy with you're just trying to pitch somebody. I think it is more of a relationship builder. You could tie it back to your email, or if you just left a voicemail, kind of find a way to loop them all together there. I think another great, valuable way to kind of build that relationship via LinkedIn is, if you see like an event coming up, maybe tag a prospect that would find that relevant and kind of position yourself as the expert there. That could also help build that relationship, kind of position yourself as somebody who is there to provide value rather than going in just for the pitch and coming in for the ask.
Love it. Mikey, anything to add?
Yeah, the thing that's been working amazingly recently is like the commenting on people's posts. I think since the pandemic, more and more people have started posting. So if you see that your prospect is quite active on LinkedIn and they're posting, try and comment something quite thoughtful, even if it's they're hiring a particular position. Tag up a few people you think could be interested or could like know some candidates. And I've seen it so many times where we've called someone, emailed them, sent them a direct message on LinkedIn, ghost nothing. You comment on one of their posts, and suddenly they email you back. It's crazy. So it's something we're actually looking at, like incorporating as part of the sequences, not just messaging someone on LinkedIn, but also actually like proactively commenting on their posts as well.
Yeah, James, thank you for the question. I think it's a really valid point, and one of the things I see in here, particularly from the more senior you go up the leadership chain, so to speak, is that LinkedIn is becoming a lesser valuable tool for them, and a more noisy tool and a distraction at times, where it's pitch, and actually the value that was there has now been diluted to a degree. So I think it's a really valid point. I think we all have a responsibility to keep that channel alive for everybody, which means using it in a valuable way and giving insight to people, helping add value to their lives, not just pitching at people all the time. So great question, really good point. Last one, and then we're going to go on to sequencing. I just want to get somebody's point, and Alex Shrimpton again, I think has nailed it. He's used the example of personalized bars of chocolate, but I'm going to tie that into, I mean, what a great way to do it. But I'm going to tie that into direct mail generally. So we've talked about channels. We've got phone, email, LinkedIn, video, voice, SMS, WhatsApp. We've completely ignored physical, which is my bad, really. I should have brought that up. So direct mail, in or out, is it something you're using now? We've got the challenges of people not necessarily always being in the office, which potentially makes it harder. But if you get it right, a really great way to stand out. So just quickly, is Mikey and Kaitlen, is direct mail on your agenda, or have you parked it for a little while?
Kaitlen, I'll let you take that one first.
Okay. Yeah, no, we use direct mail. It's still something that we do. Back when kind of everyone went remote, we did transition to more so vouchers and gift cards. But now that people are back in their offices, yeah, we're using it.
Yeah. Mikey?
Yeah, I think it works. I think you have to be thoughtful with what you send people, because if you send people, like, a lot of people just send swag of their own company. So it's like essentially they're like clothes, like t-shirts, like, you know, like you'd be wearing, but to someone that has no idea what they do. So it's like, well, why do I care about your t-shirt with my logo on, but I don't know what you're doing. So if you can send them something thoughtful, like if you see they're like into hiking and you send them like a Nike $50 voucher to like buy trainers or something, and that's really cool. But then if it's just it's the equivalent of like the spray and pray approach on email. If you're just sending like 4,000 prospects a load of swag, it's just seeing what sticks. So.
Thank you. We're going to move on from channels. I'm sure it's overlap. We've talked about sequences already, but I think we're going to focus the conversation now on cadences, sequences. I don't mind which one you call it. Feel free to use whatever your native language is. So, Mikey, up the top, you said this is your passion. We know you well for this. So let's start at the top. What does a good sequence or cadence look like? What are the things that you should be thinking about? We've established it's going to have more than one channel in. What's your first touch point? What does the beginning of that journey look like?
Yeah, so first thing is your ideal customer profile. So you've got to try and nail into some kind of niche within it, because as I said, if you do the whole like very general spray and pray, you're not going to get good results. So there's three things we look at, which is like the persona. What job title are they? So is it like a CEO? Is it a marketing leader? Is it a sales leader? The industry, maybe software, but what type of software? Is it like a fintech? Is it cybersecurity? And then the last one is a trigger. So like I mentioned one earlier, like hiring SDRs. Could be, you know, recent merger and acquisition. And if you can put all of those together, you've got a very niche list, and then your messaging is completely based off that. And then, yeah, I think we talked about at the start, Kaitlen and I had the same thing where we're doing like the triple threat, we call it. So it's an email, a LinkedIn request, and a phone call. And generally, actually, what we do on the first email is what I think someone mentioned in the comments is that give approach. So like asking their interest in something, trying to give them something of value, because then we know when we pick up the phone, we've already got a lot of trust with them. So that's typically how the start of our sequence looks.
Kaitlen, what's the very first thing you do when you're building out a cadence? What's your first step?
Yeah, so our first step, it's going to be the triple throat, similar to what Mikey said, and it will be email, LinkedIn, and then the phone call. When we are kind of looking at that, our strategy is by persona and then by market segment, and then within each sequence, when the team is going outbound, they'll be personalizing based off of the industry, or if it is like from a current customer or connection, or if they found something via LinkedIn, or if they're hiring, they'll kind of find that warm nugget and then loop in the personalization from there.
Okay. And do you tend to load certain channels early stage in sequences or in cadences, or do you tend to keep it fairly evenly spread throughout? Kaitlen, I'll stay with you.
So, like throughout the entire sequence, are we going to
so do you
heavier
load
into
more
email?
focus on one channel early and then bring other channels in, or do you do you keep it always sort of all three channels being evenly used throughout the whole journey?
Yeah, it's definitely gonna, so when I look at like our sequence, if it was a 15-step sequence, it's gonna be, it'll be about 33% on automated emails. And then you'll have 2 manual emails in there with the personalization. And then you'll have about 7 calls. And then you'll have 2 LinkedIn touch points. That's 16 steps right there. But that's kind of, yeah, you're gonna lean in heavier on the phone and email and then layer in the LinkedIn touches throughout.
Got you. Neil, any input on this in terms of how you see these structured and what you've seen work? Have you got a bigger or lesser focus on any of those channels at certain stages?
I think I learned pretty early that don't obsess with the number of steps. It doesn't mean that's the amount of times people are seeing you or getting bored. You're a lot of times you're firing blanks. So don't, if you've built out a real multi-step sequence, consider the sales cycle. Consider if there's going to be any timed offers around there. Consider how you're going to push things into nurture, and at what point, what will the triggers be? I think I'm listening to the 2 experts and nodding along and learning, and just kind of what's the primary objective, which is to get the lead and sell your service. What's the secondary objective? Is it to push them into a nurture? Is there something else that you're looking to get out there? Market intelligence, what are you looking at? And just try and shape that. So yeah, I'm going to leave what are the best sequences and cadences to the people that are designing them on a daily basis.
You meet yourself, and we'll invite you back in when we say goodbye at the end, mate. That's fine. Mikey, so what about you, mate? Where's the focus point? Are you bringing all channels in at the same and then keeping them along? Are you seeing focuses at certain points in there? And then as you answer that, maybe loop back, because I know you talk a lot about your 30-step. Kaitlen talked about approximately 15, 16 step.
Yeah.
Keen to hear on why 30 in your head.
Yeah, I think I know the differences with Kaitlen's because there's a company called Sales Impact Academy, and they invited me to do a training session on sequences. I think Sam Nelson from Outreach did another one, and then the guy was asking me about the differences. I think where ours is different is on LinkedIn. Kaitlen mentioned only a couple of LinkedIn touches. We do about 6 or 7 LinkedIn touches. We see it the same as email. Some people are wary of that because, like we were talking about earlier, LinkedIn can be a networking platform, but as long as at the start you're not pitching them, so the first 2 or 3 touches you're just kind of sharing content, engaging with them on LinkedIn. We've seen, like the 8th touch point, lots of meetings booked. In terms of, I think you mentioned the word like loading. How much do we load at the start and at the end? So across those 30 touches, generally we space out the touches like every 2 or 3 days. We don't like to do it every day because it's a bit incessant, but we'll essentially do kind of a 3 to 4 week cadence with 30 touches. And what's quite interesting is we see the majority of the meetings either come in right at the start of the sequence or right at the end of the sequence. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that some people are in the market and they're like, okay, I know in my business, I know I need help with outbound sales consulting because the rest of the guys aren't doing that well. Whereas other people need to be educated a bit more. So it's almost like by the time they've seen the 6th email and 6th LinkedIn message and like heard your voicemail, they're like, okay, now I'm understanding these pains and actually I do have these pains. So that's where we see our conversions either right at the start or right at the end of the sequence.
Isn't that common sense based? If you think about it for a second, you've got your ones right at the beginning who are probably people where time is on your side, right? The relevancy of timing is probably to a degree are fairly lucky. It's on their agenda. They know they've got a problem. Your messaging is good. You land in their inbox or on the phone at the right time and they go, yeah, I've got this problem. Absolutely. Let's talk. Versus at the end, people that maybe are kind of, I call it above the waterline and below the waterline. The below the waterline people are people that you need to sort of bear down a bit. You need to earn their trust, build credibility. Your brand needs to start to be a brand that they recognize and they see for producing good content and giving insight and educating. And you can't do that in 2 or 3 touch points. You have to do that in a lot more. That's my logic around that. Kaitlen, would you see it the same way? Do you see any other trends around conversion rates by stage or across that journey in terms of timeline?
Yeah, I think that the ones that are going to convert earlier on, it's going to lean on the sense of urgency and if you're actually hitting the pains that are like their top priorities right now. The ones that do convert later on down the sales cycle, it does take a little bit more time to wear that prospect down, but also the rep has to put a lot more energy into it in order to kind of earn the right to talk to them in order to convert it. But if you can nail it on the urgency and get to their pain and what their priorities and initiatives are, you're more likely to convert within the first like 3 to 5 steps.
Yeah, and I think, Neil, despite the fact you're claiming not to have insight on this as much as the others do, I think you made a really interesting point earlier, which is around I think you call, what did you call it? Firing blanks, which made me chuckle a bit, but I think it's a really valid point, because I think I was talking to somebody that I mentor the other day, and I was trying to get him to build his own. He's working in a very non-sales led organization, trying to build out the sales strategy in a junior role. And we were trying to build a cadence for his outreach. And one of the things that he did was build one from blank with no guidance with 4 steps in. And when I shared Mikey's example, which is a 30-step one, and I've told Mikey about that, it's got his branding and his copyright on it, so he gets the credit for it. It almost scared this guy to death, because he's like, I can't annoy people that much. Now that's a problem in itself, because we're talking about sales mentality, and people need to be coached through that. But actually, when the way I broke his mindset down around that was with data and metrics. So okay, we know that dial to connect ratio on cold calls at the moment is anywhere between 5 and 12% of dials. So if we're only doing 7 calls, statistically 7 times by that percentage, we're still not speaking to them. We've still got we're not guaranteed to have one conversation with them. They've probably only got 50-60% chance of ever talking to that person verbally during that cadence. Email rates, open rates of, I think, Kaitlen, you gave an example earlier of reply rates of, I think it was 12 to 15% or something along those lines. Open rates of maybe 20%, maybe more if we're doing well. Again, percentage-wise, if we're sending 4 emails, chances are they still might not have sent an email from you. And I think this is where volume of cadence is still important. And we preach a lot about quality, personalization, but ultimately, if you spend hours and hours personalizing something and it lands in their inbox on a busy day in amongst 20 other emails, 100 other emails, it'll probably still get deleted because they don't recognize your email address and they identify it as sales straight away. And this is where volume in a cadence plays to our strengths. Is it possible to annoy people en masse with a cadence where you're persistent and you're in their face? Mikey, what have you seen on that front?
Yeah, I was just about to jump in here. Of course, you're going to annoy people. That's sales, right? If you go into a sales role and think you're not going to annoy anyone, then you shouldn't be in sales. And it's like anything. I always say, if you believe in your product enough, right, then you should be willing to sometimes annoy people, because it may be when you cold call someone, for example, a lot of people are annoyed at the start of a cold call. But then once you start speaking, they're like, oh, yeah, actually, what you're talking about, I've got these pains at the moment. So naturally, you're going to be the sales reps that put themselves in uncomfortable situations, normally the top performers. And I've literally, some of our clients have said to me, yeah, Mikey harassed me, and now we're customers, right? So you need to be doing the same thing as he does. So you need to be doing that. You need to be annoying people and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations to get results.
Kaitlen, volume, is there too much?
I don't think there is too much volume. I think kind of what Mikey had said there is, if you are going after them and you believe in the product that you are offering, if you're speaking to the pains that they have, I mean, you're there to solve a problem for them. I think the worst thing you can do is pitch somebody with your solution without understanding their pains. So it kind of depends on how you go after it and how you position it. But if you are kind of understanding their pains and what their initiatives are, and you keep the customer and not what you're trying to sell at the top of your mind, then you shouldn't be worried about annoying. Persistence always wins.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. I like that. And we give people the right to unsubscribe. So if it was that important to people, they would click a button to unsubscribe or ask you to take them off their list, and they have the right to do that. So if they're not doing that, then in theory, we have the right to keep going. But commercially, is that the right thing to do? Because by the time we get past, in your case, Kaitlen, 16, and Mikey, in your case, 30 steps, we've put a lot of energy and effort into that prospect, a lot of time and resource. Are we now saying we're drawing a line and our focus is better placed elsewhere? Is that the reason we move on versus the notion of annoying somebody and it being too much? Or could we justify indeed going further and more outside our comfort zone and pushing towards continuing that sequence and cadence indefinitely?
And I think, sorry, Mike.
Oh, Neil's back.
Hello. all I was going to say is you've got to look at your addressable market and your ICP as well. If you've got something that's relatively niche, you don't just want to just burn through data at an absolute rate on a 4-step, oh no, this isn't going anywhere. Persistence is rewarded. There's far more people saying, hey, he's been knocking at the door for 6 months, and it was just, it then got to the right time, I got it. And sometimes the person in the organization has to sell it to a board, or has to get, even if they are budget holder and decision maker, they still got to believe in it. So some of these, if they're right, warming up, making sure there's going through the know, like, trust, funnel of that, you're already doing that remedial work at the point of this. And if there's not a large addressable market, if you're going after C-suite of, 25 million, 50 million plus, you can't just be dumping them, because you're gonna find you paint yourself into a corner.
Kaitlen, did you want to jump in on that one in terms of why we stop at 15, 16 or 30 and don't continue going with them?
So we do continue to go with them. So that's just when that sequence ends. There's different plays and different strategies, depending on the channel where you are connecting, that you would go after. And there's different ways to reconnect with somebody. So if the first sequence doesn't run, then go back, do a little bit more research, and find a different way to break through the noise. But I would never give up. Gosh,
Would you ever recycle the same sequence?
Saying that.
No, it's great. It's fantastic. Would you ever recycle the same sequence? So put them, park them, bring them back in 3 months later, understanding that timing is one of our key pillars to getting engagement in a sales outreach program.
Yeah, I would not recycle the same sequence, because a lot of the sequences will have different templates and things into it, and that's just not going to give the best experience to the customer. So I would do a different sequence or a different play. Yeah.
Mikey?
Yeah, I think similar to kind of what you were saying there, Owen. Normally we do our 3-4 week cadence. If there's no reply, or unless they're unsubscribe, then 2 months later we'll start another sequence. As Kaitlen said, it won't be the same one. We'll change it, of course, to try and break through that noise. But yeah, there's this term that people use as the last email in the sequence, which is like a breakup email, and I don't like that because it implies that you're never going to speak to them again. So I like to call it "Let's be friends for now" email, right? Because in 2 months you're going to contact them again.
I love that. So my next question was, do we like breakup emails? Mikey, I know your opinion on that. Kaitlen, have you got breakup emails built in or not?
I think a great way to do it's not really a breakup email. It's more so this, you haven't seen the value in this. Is there someone else that may see the value? So it's more so asking for a referral rather than I'm gonna put this on park right now.
Neil, I saw you shaking your head.
Not a fan, and I don't like receiving them either. It's just especially when sometimes they're the one that jars. Why don't we start with a breakup, because they're the ones that get the most. They're the ones that No, I don't think so. It's just a not right now, isn't it? It's it's just a timing thing, and even moving it, like Kaitlen said, and changing it up, getting someone else on that lead, and being able to use that. Oh, you were speaking to Owen, or Owen was reaching out to you previously, and I just wanted to re-engage or get back in touch. You can freshen it up without changing too much.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point. Look, I think I've hit a nail on the head for the top. A theme that's run through this conversation there around how would you feel if you received it. And I think when you come back to your personalization, relevancy, the channels, how would you feel if you get a cold pitch on LinkedIn when you haven't, straight after you connect with somebody? How would you feel if you got a breakup email that said, that gave you the options 1, 2, 3, you're not interested, or whatever? How would you feel if you got 4 sequence steps in the space of 24 hours, for example? I think putting yourself in a prospect's shoes is a really good way of logically saying, actually, look, this is a good experience, customer experience, or a bad potential customer experience. I'm going to go around. We've got 2 minutes left. Mikey, takeaways from today, or anything we've missed in terms of insight that you can share around either channels or sequences and cadences?
Yeah, I think just be yourself, be human. The pain, when we're outreaching now to sales leaders, what we talk about is, people are getting so many automated messages on LinkedIn, email, and the most difficult thing is breaking through the noise. So I think if you can be human and authentic and yourself and use things like videos, voice notes, that's a very good way to break through the noise.
Love it. Kaitlen?
Yeah, I think like biggest takeaway is definitely be leveraging all the channels here, but also add the value. Don't go in just calling for the call to action off the bat. Make sure that you're, there's this one term, I can't remember, I see it all the time, but it's about deposits and withdrawals. So coming forward with adding the deposit before you're asking for that meeting straight off the bat, I'd say. And then, yeah, making relevancy for the prospect.
Love it. Don't go, because I want to ask one more question of each of you. Neil, is there anything you want to add?
Give value. If you're gonna be interacting, going through that, give some of your best stuff. You know, Mikey on his 30-step sequence gives that away. The reason people then come back is go, oh, brilliant. Well, how do we do that? How do we? It's about, you know, give value. That's my kind of takeaway of all of this. You know, it's not just selling features and benefits. It's, you know, give something that's valuable to prospects.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. So my final question, Kaitlen, I'm going to give you a chance to go back to our previous conversation where, for those of you that don't know, Kaitlen came on my podcast and we talked about if you had to drop a channel for the rest of your sales career, what would that channel be? What would you do without if you had to do without something? Kaitlen answered the question with real assurance on the conversation, later came back and messaged me privately, said, not sure I agree with myself, and then later came back and said, no, I'm definitely backing myself on this. So she's had some time, a couple of months to think about it. Kaitlen, I'm going to leave you to last. Mikey, I'm going to come to you. You've got to drop a channel for the rest of your sales career. What are you dropping?
Yeah, I would say definitely email, because I think you need the phone because it's the only place you can have an interactive conversation. So you can have like a back and forth, and you can get 5 questions answered in one phone call. Whereas if you send someone 5 questions in an email, they often wouldn't reply. And the thing is, colleagues don't even reply to emails. Like if you send your colleagues emails, the reply rate on emails to colleagues is low, so let alone to like vendors. And yeah, I think email is a great channel and I would use it. But if I had to choose one out of phone, LinkedIn and email, I'd drop email.
Yeah, I think I may have asked the question the other way around with Kaitlen before, but we'll come to that in a minute, thinking about it out loud now. But Neil, I'll come to you next. If you've got to drop one.
I considered LinkedIn, but I've circled email for very similar reasons.
Kaitlen, I think I might have asked it to you the other way around. You'll remember better than I do, apparently. Is that what I asked you last time?
I think you asked if I had to rely on one, which
Pick
one would it be?
It's the other way around. Still the same answer?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to choose one, I was leaning heavy on LinkedIn, just basically relying heavily on the data that is available there. So if I had to choose one, not drop one, because we all know the phone is extremely valuable.
Yeah. So, and if you're dropping one?
Email.
Okay. So we've got a unified opinion between the 4 of us. There's a massive takeaway for people that if we're dropping a channel, it's email. And if we're picking one, my card's on table of phone every time. I think everyone's going to know that. Kaitlen, yours is LinkedIn. Neil and Mikey, I didn't ask you that way around.
Can I also just because you asked for my tip, huge tip actually. I don't know why I didn't say this because I see this all the time when we work with companies. Don't hide behind email. 90% of people that try to pitch me, they send me 3 emails and they give up and they never call me. They never send me LinkedIn messages. So pick up the phone, connect with people on LinkedIn because the majority of salespeople just rely on emails. So by doing that, you can stand out.
Yeah, I love that. There are 3 emails is a cadence, right? After all. so going back to, so you're dropping email. What's your one for the rest of your career? You've only got one channel to use.
That's a difficult one between phone and LinkedIn. I'd probably actually say LinkedIn, like Kaitlen, just because of the data that's on there, and it's quite easy to find people, whereas it's difficult to get people's phone numbers nowadays. So,
right. Neil.
I've got to go phone just for the density, for the human interaction, for being able to far more discovery. It might be hard, but once you have a conversation, you can get so much out of 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It's really powerful.
Well, audience, you've just witnessed the worst game of Would You Rather ever. But there you go. We've got some insight nonetheless. Guys, we need to wrap up now. So Mikey, Kaitlen, Neil, thank you so much. Really enjoyed hearing your input and learning from you and your expertise today. Just quickly before we wrap up, If you want to get hold of Kaitlen, it turns out the right place to do that is on LinkedIn. Kaitlen Kelly at Outreach. Mikey might be a little bit different to that. You can always pick up the phone and talk to him. But I know if you look for Michael Hanson on Growth Genie, you'll find him as well. Send me a video, phone Neil, and then you'll have the best strategies for getting in touch with us. Mikey, Kaitlen, thank you for joining us today. I really enjoyed having you on the show.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure, Owen.
Thank you to all your questions from the audience as well. And we'll see you again next month. Appreciate everybody joining us today. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.